A homeless man on the verge of death found an expensive refrigerator in a landfill, but when the vagabond looked inside, he was paralyzed by shock at what he saw. A homeless man was dying in the city dump. He didn't want to say goodbye to his miserable life, but he had no other choice. Malnutrition, unsanitary conditions, and a severe illness, likely pneumonia, were relentlessly pushing him toward his end. However, he had hoped so much to live a little longer. After all, he was still so young, barely 32 years old. That was nothing. But what hurt the poor man the most wasn't for himself, it was for his faithful dog, a big, red-haired Rocky, his only friend and companion. "I'm saying goodbye to you," the man said breathlessly between painful coughs. "Boo!" the dog whimpered pitifully, as if he understood everything, but then got distracted by fleas and began frantically scratching his neck with his hind leg, lifting his head toward the sky and curling the corners of his mouth in static relief as he scratched the itchy spot. After finishing his scratching, the dog looked somberly at the man, lay down heavily beside him, and stared into his two-legged companion's eyes. And so they lay there, under a makeshift tent of old tarps, the exhausted vagabond and his furry friend. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was someone else's fate, not his. How easily a person can fall, slip down the social ladder, and crash into the basement so hard that they break every bone and can't climb back up. In a previous life, the homeless man's name had been Cornelio Morones. He was a good guy, but he had a knack for trouble. Since childhood, he got into all sorts of mischief, no matter how hard his mother tried to straighten him out, even resorting to corporal punishment. Cornelio grew up constantly seeking adventure and had an incredible talent for finding the wrong friends and getting involved in questionable activities. As a teenager, he ended up on the police's radar, but that didn't bother him, at least he wasn't locked up. He managed in school, though not without difficulty, learning quickly. If he had put even a little effort into his studies, he would have been an excellent student and the pride of the school. But for an adventurous boy like Cornelio, diligent studying of subjects was unbearably boring. He was always running around, rushing, coming up with ideas and inventions. Most of his mental energy was focused on making money. Oh, how he loved money, just as much as he loved girls. Soon, Cornelio realized that where there was money, there were girls, and the allure of both was something he couldn't resist. But to get there, he had to figure out how to earn it. The streets offered nothing but dead ends, and though his mind teemed with schemes, none seemed to get him closer to real cash. Asking his mother for money was out of the question. He was too ashamed, she had already sacrificed so much for him. Cornelio's mother had been a strong woman, but life had beaten her down. His father, a compulsive gambler whose very name had become taboo in their household, had ruined everything. Cornelio still remembered the fights, his mother pleading with his father to stop gambling, her voice cracking as she begged him not to place that one last bet. But nothing could stop him. Night after night, he squandered what little they had, losing everything at the card table. His addiction was merciless, consuming not only their money but also the spirit of their family. When Cornelio was just a boy, his father vanished into the night, leaving a note full of excuses but no answers. With him gone, the house fell into a quiet kind of chaos. Bills piled up, and his mother worked herself to the bone, taking on double shifts to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. There were days Cornelio could see her exhaustion in the lines etched into her face, the way her hands trembled as she counted out whatever meager pay she had earned that week. But she never complained. Instead, she fought tooth and nail to pull them out of the wreckage his father had left behind. Cornelio hated his father for it. Hated how he had reduced them to this, living paycheck to paycheck, with his mother carrying the weight of a life she hadn't chosen. It fueled his determination to never end up like him, to never let gambling, or any other vice, take control of his life. But the irony wasn't lost on him, he was still chasing a different kind of game, one where money was the key to everything he wanted. And right now, Cornelio wanted the kind of life his father never gave him, security, respect, and the attention of the girls who never gave him a second glance. But how? His mind churned with ideas. He had nothing to his name, no connections, no real job prospects. School had never held much interest for him, and any chance at a formal education had evaporated along with his father. Still, Cornelio wasn't a fool. He knew how to get by, how to adapt. He had learned early on to navigate the streets, to read people, and to spot opportunities. His talent for observation was his greatest asset. Then, one day, as he wandered through the wealthier parts of the city, something clicked. Cornelio had been watching the men in their sharp suits, stepping out of expensive cars, flashing wads of cash. He noticed something they all had in common: they weren't working regular jobs. They were hustlers, but not the kind who dealt on street corners. These men were smooth, operating in the shadows of legality, dabbling in gray areas where big money moved quietly. They weren't gamblers like his father, they were strategists, men who knew how to manipulate the system without letting it chew them up. Cornelio decided then and there, if he was going to survive, if he was going to thrive, he had to become one of them. Not a gambler, but a player, someone who knew how to bend the rules in his favor without breaking them entirely. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about reclaiming his life from the shadow of his father's mistakes. From then on, Cornelio and his mother drifted from one rented place to another, living in rundown apartments with questionable tenants. Most of his mother's income went toward paying off microloans, their interest accumulating relentlessly. Despite it all, Cornelio's mother tried to stay optimistic. She smiled, never letting her son know that she had been eating the cheapest pasta for 3 days straight at work just so she could buy him a chocolate bar afterward. In front of her son and others, she always kept up appearances, smiling even when an overwhelming urge to jump from the rooftop gnawed at her insides. Only at night, when Cornelio was asleep, could she let the tears flow and cry silently. Cornelio saw this sometimes, waking up and lying still, listening to his mother's soft sobs. In those moments, a volcano of hatred for his father would erupt inside him, a burning desire to destroy everything connected to that scoundrel. Years later, when his prodigal father, now an alcoholic and in shambles, found him and mumbled through toothless gums, "Son, I'm back," reaching out for a hug, Cornelio spat at his feet in disgust. He turned and walked away. Neither his father's tears nor the curses he screamed in a frenzied realization that he had lost the last person he could rely on made Cornelio stop or slow down. Of course, Cornelio could have vented all his grievances to his father, for abandoning them in poverty, for being the cause of the stroke that took his mother's life when she was still young and full of potential. Her years of hard work had worn her down, and it was because of that scoundrel that she never had a normal life, and Cornelio never had a happy childhood. But in that moment, Cornelio felt it was all in vain. His father's personality had been destroyed by alcohol. He was no longer the man he once was, just a hollow shell, a mere avatar of his former self. Who knew what was going on inside him now? Besides, his mother had passed away long ago, and for her, Cornelio might have destroyed that drunken wreck. But now, it seemed meaningless. Cornelio never saw his father again. Instead, he started his own family, or at least he had a wife. This happened when he turned 26. By then, he had a car and a small window installation business. He worked with a partner, and the money was good. At that point, Cornelio had more or less settled down and stopped getting involved in shady dealings, although at one point, he had even resorted to petty theft. After high school, he went to college. Somehow, he managed to avoid getting expelled, which was an achievement in itself. Getting expelled from a vocational school was hard anyway. There was always a shortage of students in the programs, so they didn't kick anyone out until the very last moment. Life after graduation was full of events that could fill an entire novel, but that's beyond the scope of this story. The important thing is that Cornelio wandered aimlessly for a while until he finally found something he enjoyed: installing windows. It wasn't boring, and the money was good. Finally, he began to live like a normal person. His mother hadn't left him any inheritance, so he had to carve out a path in life on his own. He eventually realized that from now on, he didn't have to struggle, he could live comfortably. The main thing was not to waste money, although he had the bad habit of doing just that. He had a tendency to spend all his money on unnecessary purchases. As the saying goes, showing off was more important than money to him. For example, he would buy sneakers at an exorbitant price when he could find identical ones in style and quality for a third of the price. Or he would take out a loan for an expensive phone, only to pawn it later because he had invited all his friends to dinner at a restaurant on his own dime. Fortunately, over time, Cornelio managed to control his spending and began to take money more seriously. He only bought things that were truly necessary and of good quality. He avoided excess in food, drank alcohol in moderation, and stopped dining at restaurants. This sensible approach to spending allowed him to buy a car, acquire a decent wardrobe, and eventually rent a cozy, though small, one-bedroom apartment. It was in this very apartment that his wife, Laura Barros, soon moved in. Laura, a cheerful, slender, and flexible young woman, for some reason didn't seem to fit with that name. One day, as if out of nowhere, Cornelio started calling her Lorita, and the nickname stuck. From then on, he always referred to his wife by that affectionate name. Lorita didn't mind. Though she was very attractive, she was a simple-minded girl with a kind heart. Nothing could anger or upset her, she always sought the positive in everything. Her father, however, was a hardened man, reformed from the rough 1990s. He had found his place in the new world but still lived by old principles. "If you hurt her, I'll bury you," he had promised Cornelio cheerfully on the first day they met, giving him a slap on the back so hard it nearly knocked him over. Cornelio had no intention of hurting Lorita. After witnessing his mother's suffering, he had vowed never to be the cause of a woman's tears. Cornelio's attitude toward women was almost reverent, even a bit old-fashioned. There's a saying that a man opens the car door for a woman in two cases, when the car is new or when the woman is new. Cornelio, however, always opened the doors, and whenever a lady entered the room, he stood up. He simply couldn't ignore it when he saw two thugs twisting the arms of a slender, defenseless student on a certain evening in the street. The young woman, with her fluffy light hair like a dandelion and wide, childlike blue eyes, couldn't understand what these two wanted from her. "The homeless man, you dragged me here and then ran off." Cornelio wasn't afraid of corpses, but he was curious, so he decided to examine the body. The dead man seemed to be in his early 30s, slim, well-dressed, with expensive branded sneakers, and his head covered in cuts and bruises. It was clearly a murder. He wouldn't have been put in a refrigerator if he had died of natural causes, highly unlikely. The unfortunate vagabond, Cornelio, wasn't afraid of being blamed for the murder. In his mind, he had nothing left to lose. Life had stripped him of everything, his dignity, his home, his future. What difference would one more misfortune make? The streets had hardened him, and survival was his only instinct. As he crouched over the body, his hands trembled, not from fear, but from the cold. He left his fingerprints carelessly on the dead man's clothes, skin, and even his face, but it didn't matter. In the world Cornelio lived in, he was invisible. No one would care if his prints were found, they wouldn't even bother looking for him. His fingers moved swiftly, searching the dead man's pockets. At first, it was just routine, maybe there'd be something useful, a scrap of food, a few coins. But then, he felt something hard and rectangular. A wallet. Cornelio paused for a moment, his breath catching in his throat. He hadn't expected to find anything worthwhile on the man. After all, who dies with money still in their pockets? The dead are usually poor, just like the living. But the weight of the wallet gave him hope. He carefully pulled it out, glancing quickly over his shoulder to make sure no one was watching. The street was empty, shrouded in the kind of darkness that covered all sins. He opened the wallet, half expecting it to be empty or filled with useless papers. Instead, his eyes widened in disbelief. Inside was a considerable amount of money. Bills, more than he had seen in years. Cornelio's heart pounded in his chest. His fingers flipped through the notes quickly, counting. There had to be hundreds, maybe even more. For a moment, he couldn't believe his luck. His mind raced, thinking of what this money could do for him. A hot meal, a warm place to sleep, clothes that weren't falling apart at the seams. A chance at something better, even if only for a little while. But that wasn't all. Tucked behind the cash were plastic cards, credit cards. Cornelio knew little about them, but he knew enough to realize that these could be worth even more than the cash. If he played it right, these cards could open doors for him that had long been shut. They were the keys to a life he had only seen from the outside, a life he had never thought he could touch. For a moment, guilt flickered in the back of his mind. The man lying dead in front of him was once someone, maybe with a family or a story of his own. Cornelio wondered briefly who he had been, and what had led him to die alone on these cold streets. But that thought quickly faded. In this world, the living had to take what they could, or they wouldn't survive. Cornelio had learned that lesson long ago. The dead didn't need money where they were going, but the living, especially the desperate, needed every advantage they could get. Slipping the wallet into his pocket, Cornelio stood up. His eyes scanned the area one last time. The city around him was eerily silent, its usual hum dulled by the lateness of the hour. He knew he had to leave before someone found the body. The money wouldn't last forever, but it was a start. More than he had dared to hope for in a long time. As Cornelio walked away from the scene, the weight of the wallet in his pocket felt heavier than it should. He didn't know what he'd do next, or how long this streak of luck would last. But for the first time in years, he had a choice, a chance to rewrite his story, even if it was one born out of desperation. He had stolen someone else's opportunity, but Cornelio no longer cared. In his world, survival was a game, and tonight, he had one. Wow, he breathed, feeling an inexplicable surge of energy. One of the cards had the name Rollo Bellard. Tough luck for you, Rollo, Cornelio sighed with sincere sympathy and continued his search. Suddenly, he found a mobile phone. It was a type of phone that almost no one used anymore, especially the young. The screen was broken and covered in blood, so Cornelio threw it away immediately. It was worthless. The dead man had nothing else of value, so Cornelio decided to leave him. He thought about calling the police, but no. He had already had enough dealings with them. They would find the body eventually, and if they didn't, what did it matter to him? Cornelio had rotted away in life, wheezing from a cough. Had anyone brought him medicine? Only that flea-ridden, lame dog had stayed by his side. Let fate decide the poor man's destiny. Cornelio had his own problems. The only thing Cornelio did was cover Rollo's remains with some nearby trash. Then he began walking away, planning to have some tea by his tent and then go back to sleep. Just as he was about to leave, a sharp melody suddenly rang out from somewhere below, catching his attention. What is that? Looking around, the man noticed the phone he had discarded. Its screen was glowing through the cracks and bloodstains, and the phone vibrated nervously on the ground. Overcoming his disgust, Cornelio, not really understanding why, carefully picked up the phone with 2 fingers and pressed the green call button. Yes, hello, good afternoon, said a voice that clearly belonged to a young man. Are you going to pick up your order? I've been waiting here for an hour. What order? From the computer store. I've been calling you, but you didn't answer. Ideas had never come to Cornelio so quickly before. And what address did you go to? He asked. Well, Central Street 53. You live in the attic, right? Isn't that your address? I've delivered to you before, you always left great tips. Look, friend, Cornelio sighed, I've been really overwhelmed, so maybe you should cancel the order. What? But you already paid. Oh, I did. Well, then keep it. No, I can't do that. Then come back in a few days, all right? Cornelio suggested. Sure, no problem, just don't file a complaint against me, okay? Of course not, don't worry, friend, the homeless man replied and hung up. Only now did he realize that he had spoken to the delivery guy almost without coughing. In fact, he felt a surge of energy, as if he had won some mystical lottery. It was as if the guy in the refrigerator had died in his place today. Cornelio headed resolutely back to his tent. He knew what he needed to do. From under a pile of junk, he pulled out a small hiking backpack, a pair of jeans, some sneakers, and a jacket. These were relatively decent clothes, though the smell of the dump, which had soaked into his messy hair and scruffy beard, would give him away. His worn, red skin was also a sad testimony to his poor condition. After changing into the clothes, he packed a few belongings into the backpack and whistled loudly, calling for Rocky. Seeing the dog slowly emerge from behind a pile of debris, Cornelio headed to his hideout. There, in an improvised garage made of planks and plastic tarps, was an electric scooter. This wonder had been given to him by another homeless man after Cornelio saved him from a gang of angry teenagers. The homeless man was an old retired engineer who had found the broken scooter in some bushes, probably stolen by a troublemaker who had wrecked it along the way. The old man found all the necessary parts and resurrected the broken scooter, then gave it to Cornelio as a token of gratitude. The new owner accepted the gift with joy, taking care of it, making sure the battery was in good condition, and regularly charging it with a car battery he had found or at charging stations around the city. Now he planned to use it to get to Rollo's house, hoping the charge would last. He put a leash on Rocky and set off. He drove slowly so the lame dog wouldn't get too tired. The trip was long, he wouldn't have made it on foot or by bicycle. Cornelio rode along the edge of the road, oblivious to everything around him, the cars, the people curiously peeking from the windows of passing vehicles. Rocky obediently trotted behind his owner, and Cornelio tried not to rush so the dog wouldn't strain its injured leg. Finally, they reached the street and the house. It was clearly an expensive residential complex, obvious at first glance. The cars parked around were far from cheap. Fortunately, the door was open, or they might not have been able to get in. But luckily, the lower floors housed some private daycares, fitness clubs, and other facilities, so the doors were left open for clients from other streets. Sweating and straining, Cornelio lifted the scooter and began climbing the steps to the entrance. Rocky limped quietly beside him, clearly surprised and confused. He had never visited such exclusive complexes and didn't quite understand why they were there. A woman with a child exited the building, and upon seeing Cornelio and his large dog, wrinkled her nose in disgust. She quickly rushed to close the door behind her, but Cornelio reached out to stop her. As soon as he entered the building, or rather the grand lobby, given how spacious, bright, and beautiful it was, he immediately encountered a new obstacle in the form of the concierge, who even stood up in her glass booth as soon as she saw the pair enter. "Hey, who are you here to see?" the thin young woman with a stern expression asked in an unfriendly tone. She knew perfectly well that this man couldn't be a resident, let alone a relative or friend of someone living there. Filled with inexplicable confidence, even audacity, Cornelio calmly replied, "I'm Rollo's cousin. Just passing through, don't worry about my appearance, I just returned from a hiking trip in the Altai Mountains and caught a bit of a cold. Rollo said you'd give me the key." "I don't believe you," the woman said. "He would have told me." Cornelio smirked sarcastically, not even knowing why, and suddenly the concierge sighed sadly, her mood shifting. "Yeah, you're right," she responded in a completely different tone. "He never greets me, only talks to me when he needs something, and always forgets my name." "Of course, he remembers your name. He said Liliana would give me the keys," the impostor lied indifferently. "See? What did I tell you?" sighed the concierge. "I'm not Liliana. I've always been Juana," she said, handing over the keys through the window. "Thanks," the vagabond said, forcing a smile as he took the keys. Then he asked, What floor? 17th, the woman replied grumpily. Lucky number, I like it, Cornelio muttered as he stepped into the elevator. He found the apartment right away, and the lock opened easily. Once inside, he was speechless. It was a modern apartment, furnished according to the latest trends, a living room combined with a kitchen, a spacious bedroom with a huge bed, and a bathroom with a jacuzzi. Rocky immediately began sniffing around while Cornelio collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted, and fell asleep or simply lost consciousness. His tired body had spent its last energy on this journey. It was no joke, just that morning, he had been contemplating the afterlife, and now he lay in a luxurious apartment on a comfortable sofa, the cost of which he wouldn't even dare guess. After an indeterminate time in unconsciousness, Cornelio struggled to open his swollen eyelids and looked around the room with inflamed eyes, trying to understand where he was. Instead of the narrow cocoon of junk and rags, he was surrounded by the spaciousness of a beautiful, clean apartment. And instead of the patched tent he woke up to every morning, he now gazed at a high, clean ceiling. Everything around him was spotless, with minimal furniture, lots of glass, air, beauty, and luxury. No, it wasn't a dream or a hallucination, he had really gotten there on the scooter with his dog and had really found a body in the refrigerator. His cough still tormented him, and his chest ached, he needed something warm to drink. Cornelio headed to the kitchen area and momentarily felt confused as he looked around. Yes, this guy liked gadgets, including kitchen appliances, an elegant coffee machine, a stove he didn't quite know how to use, a dishwasher, and a bunch of other gadgets for making hot sandwiches, fresh juices, and more. Opening the fridge, Cornelio was almost moved to tears, it was full of food. Grabbing the first thing he found, he began eating ravenously, not even savoring the food. Only later did he realize it was some kind of pie with a spicy filling. He quickly figured out the coffee machine and soon brewed a cup of aromatic coffee, which he drank almost in one gulp, burning his tongue and throat. This caused him to cough even more. What an idiot I am, Cornelio shook his head. After calming his initial hunger, he made another cup of coffee, took out some herbs, meat, found bread, and prepared multi-layered sandwiches. Then he sat at the table and called for his dog in a hoarse voice. Rocky, where are you, buddy? From somewhere deep inside the apartment came the sound of heavy steps, accompanied by the clinking of claws on the floor. The dog ran into the kitchen, wagging its tail happily, and immediately received its sandwich, which it devoured in one bite, though it managed to spit out some of the vegetables. Hungry, poor thing, Cornelio sighed. Also thirsty, he got up, found a ceramic bowl, filled it with water, placed it on the floor, and watched as his four-legged friend drank greedily. Sitting back in the comfortable chair, Cornelio began to savor his breakfast. Suddenly, his gaze fell on the black, mirrored surface of the oven, where a disheveled bandit with a tangled beard stared back at him. For the first few seconds, Cornelio was startled, but then he realized it was only his own reflection. What a horror! How far have I fallen? If I had met someone like this on the street before, I would have avoided them. Now, I'm that same scruffy vagabond everyone avoids. After breakfast, he went straight to the shower. The plumbing was top-notch, and the shower looked like something out of a spaceship. The shelves were filled with various bottles and containers, as if a girl lived here instead of a man, but the scents of the toiletries were masculine. Cornelio quickly realized that no woman lived here, Rollo, or rather, had lived here, completely alone. Otherwise, there would have been another toothbrush in the bathroom, but there was only one electric toothbrush, no women's slippers or robes, and no small decorations in the apartment. It was all masculine minimalism. Cornelio spent an entire hour in the shower, feeling like he couldn't get clean, and the knots in his hair wouldn't untangle. He only left the shower when he felt weak and dizzy again. Wrapping himself in a towel, he went to the bedroom, got into bed, turned on the TV, and, for the first time in a long time, felt like a human being. Cornelio spent 3 days in Rollo's apartment, not leaving the place or even really exploring it. He moved from the bedroom to the kitchen and back, mostly lying in bed and watching TV. He ate, took frequent showers, as if trying to wash away his past. In the kitchen, he found a medicine cabinet full of a wide variety of medications. It wasn't clear if Rollo had been ill or if he was just a hypochondriac. The medications had clearly been bought in large quantities, many still in their packaging. Finding antibiotics, cold remedies, and vitamins, Cornelio began swallowing pills, hoping to recover. Everything seemed like a fog, as if it weren't even happening to him. His mind was clouded, he couldn't think or analyze. He didn't care about many things that seemed simple, like where he had been relieving himself. Rocky only thought about this when the cheerful and well-fed dog jumped onto his bed, leaving muddy footprints on the white sheets. "Hey, what's this?" "Rocky, where did this dirt come from?" With his tail still wagging happily, the dog made it clear that he wanted the biped to follow him. He led Cornelio to the stairs, which Cornelio had noticed right away but didn't have the energy or will to climb. It was obvious that this was the way to the roof. Following Rocky upstairs, Cornelio discovered that the dog had led him to a winter garden full of plants whose names Cornelio didn't even want to know. There were piles of soil scattered on the floor. "Oh, I see," Cornelio said, "you found yourself a bathroom up here, just like a cat. But that's okay, I feel a little better now. I'll take you outside." Cornelio himself was surprised at how quickly good food and hot drinks had revived him. The dead man in the fridge, cynical as it sounded, had become his salvation. However, his thoughts were still as muddled as jelly. He didn't think about the corpse of the apartment owner, nor about whether Rollo would be missed, or if someone would come looking for him. His phone was dead and wasn't ringing, so there were no external worries. Cornelio didn't even think about the crime that had been committed. He was consumed by an irrational, selfish feeling that had given him permission to live in someone else's apartment. The man decided that if the police came, if he was arrested and accused of the murder, at least he would have spent his last days living like a human being. He had no intention of staying in prison or dying sick. He would find a way out on his own. Deciding to take the free-spirited dog outside, Cornelio put on the first sportswear he found in the closet. The owner's clothes fit him well. He leashed the dog, took the elevator down, and dodged the displeased concierge, who immediately began asking about Rollo. "He's been gone for so long and isn't coming back," Cornelio lied. "Well, I didn't see him leave with a suitcase," the concierge said. "Why would he need a suitcase?" asked the impostor. "Why would anyone need a suitcase or at least a sports bag to leave for a trip?" "No, you're not fooling me. I have a feeling something's not right here. I warn you, if Rollo doesn't show up in the next 2 days, I'll call the police." "And on what grounds?" Cornelio sneered. "Because you're not just standing here in a skirt, you're taking care of things, and you need to know what's going on with the residents, right?" "I respect that, Juana," Cornelio praised the concierge, then walked away from the building. The well-fed Rocky strutted importantly alongside him. "You remembered my name," the concierge muttered under her breath, but Cornelio didn't hear her. Moving slowly with weakened legs, the renewed vagabond headed behind the building to find a spot for the dog. Just behind the building, there was a small park with trees and a stream. It was a pleasant spot, although there were quite a few people around. After some effort, Cornelio found a secluded corner, sat down on the grass, and watched the water while the dog explored the area. "Is that your dog?" asked a sharp female voice from behind, clearly looking to start a scene. "Yes, he is," Cornelio admitted. Turning toward the voice, he saw an angry middle-aged woman. "Why is your dog so big and dirty, and without a muzzle? There are children here, you know." "It's fine, we're leaving right now," he promised. "Exactly, leave," the woman said, turning away and muttering to herself, "Damn hipsters, they've gotten out of control." Cornelio stood up, called Rocky, and led him out of the park. The dog protested, clearly not wanting to leave such a wonderful spot. but Cornelio ignored him because something incredible had just happened. For the first time, he had been treated as an equal and mistaken for a hipster, instead of a vagabond or beggar, as usual. A dubious compliment, but better than the looks of disgust he was used to. On the way back, or rather, back to Rollo's apartment, he bought medicine and some groceries. Surprisingly, he wasn't thrown out of the store. The cashier greeted him with a friendly smile and even offered him a bag. Cornelio tried paying by card and was pleasantly surprised when the payment went through without requesting a PIN. Apparently, no confirmation was needed for small amounts. Back in the apartment, he prepared food for himself and emptied a whole can of dog food for Rocky. After lunch, he dragged the reluctant dog to the bathroom and washed him with expensive shampoos. The dog wasn't happy. It seemed that the dirt clinging to his fur was precious to him as a keepsake. Irritated, Rocky shook himself off and, grumbling in discontent, clattered his long claws on the smooth floor, leaving wet marks behind. "Hey, no messing around, no jumping on the couch. You can lie there once you're dry," Cornelio ordered. "Remember, this is someone else's apartment. When we have our own, you can do whatever you want." The dog grumbled unhappily and lay down on a rug, casting a resentful glance sideways. Meanwhile, Cornelio decided to inspect the apartment more thoroughly, examining every corner. Clarity was gradually returning, and he began to realize the strange, even frightening situation he was in. He had taken over the apartment of a man he had found dead in the fridge. The man had been murdered. Who? Why? And why wasn't anyone looking for him? The all-in-one computer on the desk and the closed laptop that Cornelio had noticed earlier, he tried turning them on, but they were password protected and wouldn't work. Searching through the cabinets and shelves, he found nothing relevant except a considerable amount of money. But what he definitely hadn't expected to find was a terrarium with a huge spider. "Well, damn," Cornelio muttered, realizing that the glass box wasn't empty but housed a massive, hairy creature with a swollen abdomen. "What are you? At least don't eat me." The spider didn't respond, and Cornelio decided the creature was probably just observing him. "I should probably offer you something as a sacrifice. What do spiders eat? Otherwise, it might bite me." Cornelio was amazed at how beautiful the dog looked once cleaned. The only problem was that fleas were still bothering Rocky, who kept scratching absent-mindedly. "I need to fix this," Cornelio said, shaking his head. "I'll go get some flea treatment." He himself was frequently troubled by lice, and washing his head with gasoline would solve the problem but also leave burns. Then, a brilliant idea came to him: what if he cut his hair? There was a barber shop nearby, and surprisingly, there was an available chair. The stylist, a picky young man, examined Cornelio's lifeless hair and, scraping his scalp painfully with a comb, asked with disgust, "Do you have psoriasis?" "No, they're kerosene burns. I was tortured by a gang because I know where the suitcase with the money is hidden." The stylist cut Cornelio's hair in silence. After that, with a stylish haircut and his beard trimmed, Cornelio barely recognized himself in the mirror. Later, as he passed the concierge on his way back, he caught her surprised gaze. "Wow," she commented. "I'm surprised too," Cornelio nodded. It was about time. "By the way, Serge always looks well-groomed. When is he coming back?" "I don't know, he's busy with his own matters," Cornelio responded indifferently as he headed toward the elevator. "Remember the thing with the police?" the concierge whispered ominously, but the mysterious tenant didn't even turn around. Back in the apartment, Cornelio treated Rocky for parasites, then looked at himself in the mirror again and was astonished by his transformation. This new life, although stolen and not truly his, seemed to offer him a chance at rebirth. The mirror reflected a tired but rather attractive young man, with a fashionable haircut and well-groomed beard. His skin had improved, and his eyes were brighter. At that moment, he felt a pang of sympathy for the late Rollo. It was as if they had traded places. He should have ended up in the trash while Rollo enjoyed life in his penthouse. But things had turned out differently, and Cornelio definitely wasn't to blame. His only fault was taking advantage of the situation. Unfair, perhaps, but he had long come to believe that people were often no different from animals, and only the strongest, smartest, and most cunning survived in this world. And he had sworn to survive. Another week passed in the stranger's apartment, and no one was looking for Rollo. One day, Cornelio remembered the phone he had found on the deceased. The device had been dead for a long time, forgotten in the pocket of the pants the former homeless man had been wearing when he arrived at the deceased's apartment. The carefully folded charger was in the desk drawer. When Cornelio plugged in the cable, the phone didn't respond right away, as if it didn't believe it was finally receiving the much-anticipated dose of electricity. Then the screen lit up cheerfully, displaying the phone's brand name before the device powered on. For a while, nothing happened until, suddenly, envelopes labeled as Yola began to appear on the screen, text messages. Cornelio couldn't open them because he didn't know the PIN code, but he was able to answer an incoming call that rang just as the phone powered up. "Hello." Cornelio answered unnecessarily. "Who is this?" a stern voice, identified as Yola, demanded. "It's me, Yola." "Where's Rollo?" she demanded through the receiver. Cornelio abruptly hung up, and immediately someone started banging hard on his door. Startled by the unexpected noise, he felt a chill run down his spine. So, it's finally happening. The police are coming for me. His thoughts started spinning chaotically in his head, bouncing around like ping-pong balls. Run, hide. Stay. Open the door. Don't jump from the 17th floor and end it all, Cornelio thought, frozen in place as the knocks on the door grew more insistent. Approaching cautiously, he heard a demanding female voice. "Open up. Open the door right now, whoever you are, or I'll break it down." Cornelio felt an inexplicable need to comply, so he turned the doorknob until it clicked. A disheveled girl with curly hair burst into the hallway. "You?" Cornelio said, astonished. "You?" replied the girl, equally surprised. It was Yolanda, the same journalist who had been the only one to stand up for Cornelio during his trial. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her expression changing from combative to confused. It's a long story," Cornelio stammered. "I'm not in a hurry." "Tell me where my brother is," Yolanda demanded. "Your brother? Rollo?" "Yes, Rollo." "You'd better sit down, Yolanda. Your brother is dead." Yolanda's reaction was predictable. She visibly faltered, her legs gave out, and she nearly collapsed. Rocky, staying out of sight, watched as Cornelio helped her recover with a glass of water. Then, she sobbed, covering her face with her hands, while Cornelio recounted everything from the moment he found the refrigerator to that very day. Once composed, the girl said, "You acted despicably, and the fact that life has been cruel to you all these years doesn't excuse you. Do you understand that I have to call the police?" "I understand," Cornelio sighed. "But I won't," the girl said, her voice cold. "Why not?" Cornelio asked, surprised. "Because I pity you. I know you didn't kill Rollo. He was taken out by someone powerful, someone who's also your enemy." "My enemy?" "Yes, the one who sent you to prison without cause, our mayor. Rollo worked for him. He was involved in security systems and uncovered some of the mayor's dark dealings. We knew that, but Rollo found solid evidence. He knew it would end badly." "I'm sorry," Cornelio muttered. "Let's go," ordered Yolanda, heading toward the door. "Where?" Cornelio asked. "To the dump. We need to find the refrigerator together. For now, let's move the body. We can't just leave it there." "Are you crazy, Yolanda?" Cornelio turned pale. "Where are we going to take it? How do you expect us to do that?" "I have a contact, an expert forensic doctor. We need to get the body to him for an autopsy. I need to know exactly how my brother died. Understand that the mayor has everything under control. I'm not sure another examination would be reliable. As they passed the concierge's booth, Cornelio caught the cold, stern gaze of the strict attendant, who immediately approached Yolanda, clearly familiar with her. "Tell me, dear," the attendant said, addressing Yolanda with a familiarity that made her cringe, given that she and Juana were about the same age. "Do you know this man? Is he really your cousin?" "I haven't decided yet," the journalist replied brusquely, pushing the door firmly as she left the building. "Is the dog coming with us?" she asked, noticing Rocky limping along with his pink tongue hanging out. "He's always with me," Cornelio shrugged, "and it'll be easier to find the refrigerator with him. I was sick at the time, my head was in a fog. I'm afraid I won't find it now. I can hear your cough. You should do something about that. Have you seen a doctor?" "No. That's a mistake. Anyway, let's go." They got into the car and drove toward the city dump. Getting there wasn't easy, the area was guarded. But anyone determined enough to enter knew there were plenty of ways to bypass security. When they arrived, Cornelio first found his makeshift tent. His heart filled with nostalgia and self-pity as he gazed at his improvised shelter, built from trash and sticks. He held on to it with great affection, even though it had only protected him from the rain and cold. "What a mess," Yolanda shook her head. "They've ruined your life, Cornelio." "Yes, and now they've killed my brother too," sighed the girl, allowing Rocky to sniff Rollo's phone. Cornelio followed the dog as it sniffed the air and ground several times. Rocky took the wrong path a couple of times, and Yolanda rolled her eyes, doubting the intelligence of the stray dog. But finally, the dog found the right spot. As soon as the journalist saw the refrigerator lying on its side, she rushed toward it, and Cornelio, reluctant to see the body again, followed her hesitantly. "It should be under that tarp and some foam pieces. I covered him," the vagabond tried to explain. "How thoughtful," the girl replied sarcastically. She began to dig through the pile of junk with her hands, and Cornelio turned away, not wanting to see the remains. "There's nothing here," Yolanda suddenly said, looking at Cornelio in confusion. "What? There should be." "I didn't imagine it," Cornelio exclaimed and started helping, moving pieces of tarp and plastic. Soon, it became clear that there was no mistake, the body of Rollo had disappeared. Indeed, they returned home empty-handed. Yolanda went to shower and emerged with wet hair, without makeup, wrapped in an indigo bathrobe. She acted as if she were at home but didn't ask Cornelio to leave, as if his presence was somehow justified. "The police won't help," said the journalist. "Everything's been bought, or everyone's too scared. So, we'll have to take matters into our own hands. First, we should check the computer. I don't think there will be anything crucial there. Rollo wouldn't have left serious information in such an accessible place as his home computer. But there might be a clue." "There's no password," Cornelio said. "You're wrong," replied Yolanda, and she went to the hallway. She returned with a bag, from which she pulled out a mobile phone and a memory card. "Impressive," Cornelio approved. "But your brother seemed to prefer old phones." "Exactly," Yolanda nodded. "And that's no coincidence. It's a precaution. Rollo didn't get involved in serious and dangerous matters lightly, and he didn't trust anyone. Except me. But even then, he didn't tell me everything, to keep me safe. But I know the password to his computer. He trusted me with that and said that if anything happened, I'd have to handle it." Yolanda turned out to be a skilled computer user, and with physical access, she easily cracked the password, found hidden folders, and opened files. But she shook her head and clicked her tongue, there was nothing useful, and many files were encrypted beyond recognition. She spent several hours combing through the files and was nearly exhausted. "Do you want me to check these files while you rest?" Cornelio offered. "Sure," I'll just sleep in my murdered brother's apartment, which is now occupied by a coughing vagabond, she said irritably. Cornelio remained silent, and Yolanda felt guilty for her harshness. It's fine. I'm sorry, she apologized. No, you don't have to apologize. You've got a lot on your plate, Cornelio replied in an understanding tone. That's true, but I must admit I was prepared for this turn of events. Do you know how many threats I've received personally? She waved her hand dismissively. I'm sure our city would be a different place if we could expose our precious mayor. Your brother wanted justice too, didn't he? Cornelio speculated. Oh no, believe me, he wanted money. And he was fully aware of how grave the risks were. But he was sure he could outsmart everyone. Unfortunately, he couldn't. Just like I can't seem to beat this spider, Yolanda said irritably. Only then did Cornelio notice that she was playing a simple black and white game where the goal was to chase a giant spider out of a house. The spider kept dodging and staying in the corner of the web on the floor. He wrote that? Cornelio asked. Yes. Before he got into security systems, he used to develop games. One day, the mayor's subordinates requested his services and provided all the resources for gathering data. That's when he got explosive, incriminating material. Why didn't they eliminate him immediately? Because Rollo wasn't an idiot. He operated anonymously, Yolanda sighed. Hey, don't you think this game is strange? It's practically impossible to win, don't you think? Cornelio asked. Yolanda froze, staring at the screen, then slowly turned her gaze to Cornelio and said, You know you're a genius, right? No, Cornelio replied, confused. Jumping from her chair, Yolanda ran to the spider's terrarium, pulled the hairy monster from its lair, and handed it to Cornelio as if it were a kitten. How's it going, little one? Cornelio said softly. Have you fed it? Yes, I caught some bugs in the winter garden, Cornelio sighed. Here, hold this, Yolanda said, placing the spider in Cornelio's hands, and began rummaging through the terrarium. Cornelio stood still, trying not to pass out from embarrassment. Meanwhile, Rocky pretended to be fast asleep, offering no assistance. Here! Yolanda suddenly exclaimed, pulling out a small package. Inside was another, even smaller package, which contained a metal key with an engraving. What's this? Cornelio asked, his voice trembling as he continued to hold the repugnant creature, realizing Rocky had no intention of rescuing him from this situation. It's a key. A key to a safety deposit box, explained Yolanda. But it's useless without a plastic card with a QR code. Without it, the key won't work, and we don't even know which bank it's for. Another mystery. Exhausted, Yolanda let her arms drop in total frustration. I'm out of ideas, she sighed, putting the spider back in the terrarium. I'm sorry to bother you, Luna, Yolanda muttered. Luna? The monster's name is Luna. Don't worry, she's very cute and completely harmless. By the way, I gave her to Rollo as a gift. Why? Cornelio asked, genuinely surprised. What else do you give to someone who has everything? Fair point. Well, Yolanda, I think you really need to rest. I'll take care of checking the computer. Maybe I can find something. Cornelio spent the whole night in front of the screen. There was nothing on any of the devices that could be deciphered. Despite her promise to stay awake, Yolanda succumbed to sleep. Rocky curled up at her feet on the couch, snoring loudly. Deciding to relax a bit, Cornelio turned on the spider game that Yolanda had been playing earlier. Winning was truly impossible. The goal was to trap the spider with a broom, squash it with a shoe, or kill it with spray and other tools, but the multi-legged creature skillfully dodged each threat. The game was starting to annoy Cornelio when he noticed something. I can't believe what I'm seeing, he said slowly. Yolanda, have you seen this? What? Yolanda asked, rubbing her eyes. Have you noticed that the spider moves along a specific trajectory? What spider? Oh, in the game. Yes, look. I use the first tool, a shoe, and try to kill the spider. It escapes. Look, doesn't it seem like a letter? Yes, Yolanda exhaled. It's the letter C. Next tool. What do you see? R, then L, and then A. Carla. Carla Lars. Rollo's girlfriend. But I seriously doubt she knows anything. He didn't even bring her to his apartment. Yolanda shook her head. What kind of relationship is that, if he never invited her home? Cornelio shrugged. I don't know what they had between them. He wasn't planning on starting a family. But she wanted to marry him. He got really angry with her. Then why was he with her? Well, she's beautiful. And why didn't she leave? I don't know. Rollo liked women in general. Yolanda raised her hands. Yeah, I noticed how even Juana, the concierge, had a crush on him. Anyway, if we have Carla's number, we should call her. It's 6 a.m. We'll call her a little later. But this is urgent. Yes, and that's why it's important not to scare her off. I'm not sure what she knows, but it's in our interest to get her to talk. Waiting until 9 a.m. to finally call Rollo's girlfriend was a challenge. Finally, the number was dialed, and a melodic but tired voice answered. Hello, Carla. Hello. This is Yolanda. Yes, hello, sighed the girl. We need to meet urgently. It's a matter of life and death. I can't. I'm at work. My boss is strict, and I won't be able to get away, Carla responded indifferently. Carla, Rollo is dead. What? How? Carla could barely believe what she was hearing. And that's what we want to find out, Yolanda said calmly, listening as Carla gasped, overwhelmed by impending hysteria. Maybe I'll take some time off, Carla murmured, her voice trembling. Carla arrived, looking beautiful but modestly dressed. She could have lived differently with her appearance, but she chose a modest life, working a regular job with a low salary and being in a relationship with a man who didn't value her. Or maybe he did, since he had even encrypted her name in the game. Carla's eyes were red, and her hands were shaking. Cornelio offered her a glass of water, then another, and another, until it seemed like she was ready to drink an entire Niagara Falls. Finally, she calmed down and looked around. It's the first time I've been to your house. I know you had a unique relationship, Yolanda sighed. Yes, I loved him so much that I was willing to accept those terms, just existing in his life, brightening his free time when he wanted, and being pushed into the background the rest of the time. Is that fair, Carla? Cornelio shook his head, blinded by the girl's beauty. No woman deserves to be treated like that. What a nice purse, Yolanda suddenly commented. A Birkin? Are you crazy? Carla unexpectedly responded. I don't have that kind of money. It's just a regular Chinese purse. There should be a serial number inside, the journalist insisted. Yolanda, I don't think discussing the purse is very relevant right now, Cornelio tried to be diplomatic, catching Carla's grateful glance and offering her a shy smile. He still wasn't used to women not turning away from him in disdain. All right, let's get back to the point, said Yolanda. She was surprisingly calm and composed. Cornelio was baffled, given that her brother had just died and she had found out the night before. Yet, she remained calm and serene, able to keep her composure. Or maybe she simply didn't care, it was strange. Meanwhile, the victim's sister continued the interrogation, asking about their conversations, if Rollo had shared any important information with Carla, or if he had said anything that she might have overlooked but could be valuable to the investigation. But no, Rollo hadn't talked to Carla about trivial matters. They might have discussed a dish at a restaurant, a trip, or a movie, but nothing more. He hadn't talked about his work or made future plans with her. If he were mine. Cornelio sighed and met the gaze of the beautiful girl with her big, sad eyes. I would have showered a girl like that with gifts. You're a genius, Cornelio. Yolanda suddenly exclaimed. Carla, did Rollo ever give you something? Not really anything special, just practical gifts, a toaster, a vacuum cleaner, the journalist sighed. That sounds like my brother. Oh, wait. He also gave me a pendant. Honestly, it's quite ugly, but he insisted I wear it all the time. I didn't like it, but whenever we met, I wore it to avoid upsetting Rollo. Now I'll keep it as a cherished memory and wear it often to remember him. A pendant? Why didn't you mention it before? Do you have it with you? Yolanda asked nervously, wringing her hands. Yes, Carla said, confused, and began rummaging through her fake purse. She finally pulled out a silver pendant in the shape of a spider with a large black abdomen. As you can see, it's not my style. With trembling hands, Yolanda took the pendant and examined it from all angles. I need a magnet, she said. A magnet? Cornelio asked, surprised. Yes, please bring one. The man went to the kitchen and took the magnet from the chrome refrigerator door. Yolanda snatched the magnet from his hands and immediately brought it close to the pendant. A barely perceptible click was heard almost instantly. What's that? Carla asked, unable to hide her surprise. The journalist didn't answer. She silently opened the pendant and pulled out a small plastic card. This is the second half of the key, Yolanda exhaled. We found the missing piece. How was it inside the pendant? Cornelio asked, baffled. Yes, Yolanda nodded. But how did you know? It's simple. This is my pendant. Well, I had a similar one when I was a child. It opened with a magnet. Rollo set everything up, making sure no one would discover anything, except me. Do you understand? He left a message for me. So, it's a key? Carla asked in a changed voice. But for what? For a bank safety deposit box. But I don't know what's inside. I think it's compromising material on a very important person, Yolanda said, referring to the mayor. He was her archenemy, and she eagerly hoped he would finally pay for all his crimes. The city was dominated by the mafia, and no one could do anything about it. And where's the other half of the key? Carla asked. I have it, the journalist replied coldly. Thank you, Carla, for your help. Once again, my condolences. We're in the same boat, having both lost someone dear to us. But I promise you, I will find the killer and make him pay for what he's done. Turning to Cornelio, Yolanda said, let's go to the bank. Urgently. Don't rush, Carla said slowly, rising from the couch. Her hand sank into her purse for a few seconds, and suddenly, she pulled out a gun. It looked real, at least it appeared to be. What? Yolanda couldn't believe what she was seeing. Cornelio's jaw dropped, and Rocky, who had also been watching the scene, tilted his head in confusion. I won't repeat myself, Carla warned ominously. But why, Carla? Where did you get a gun? Yolanda asked, bewildered. That's none of your business. Yours, dear, said Carla sharply. Cornelio now looked at her with completely different eyes. The poor, furry lamb who had lost her fiancé had suddenly transformed into an aggressive panther, a predator ready to strike at any moment. Carla, reconsider, please, the vagabond politely requested. But this only made her give a disdainful smile. Yeah, sure. I guess I'll stop, the girl said mockingly, but Cornelio was so stunned by the situation that he didn't even understand what was happening. Ugh, I thought you were serious, the man said in relief, lowering his hands. Hands up, idiot, the girl shouted, waving the revolver threateningly. Cornelio had hoped it was a joke. Enough, Yolanda, place both keys on that coffee table and step away, Carla ordered sternly. Reluctantly, the sister of the deceased approached the table and placed both keys on its smooth, transparent surface. "Good girl," the beauty praised, showing her predatory teeth in a smile. "Now get lost." With her head lowered, Yolanda stepped back while Carla continued pointing her gun at her opponents. "I could shoot you in the forehead, and no one would hear. The gun has a silencer. But that would deprive me of the pleasure of watching sweet Yolanda struggle for justice, unaware that the person she's up against is beyond her abilities." "I thought you loved Rollo," the journalist said thoughtfully. "That idiot? You've gone crazy," the beauty sneered. Meanwhile, Cornelio exchanged a confused look with Rocky, who didn't understand what was going on. Cornelio winked subtly at his four-legged friend. The dog raised one eyebrow, then the other, but didn't seem to catch the hint. Unable to contain himself, Cornelio whispered, "Attack! Attack!" In response to the silent question, Rocky nodded toward the girl with the gun, but the dog either didn't understand or pretended not to. Instead, he rested his head on his front paws, giving Cornelio a submissive look. Disappointed and feeling guilty, Cornelio looked at Carla, who was laughing triumphantly. "You're all idiots," she mocked disdainfully, backing toward the exit while keeping her aim on Cornelio and Yolanda. "Goodbye, losers," she said, turning sharply toward the door and preparing to leave the apartment. But suddenly, there was a dull thud, and the girl was thrown back, hitting her head on the corner. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," said a young man's frightened voice. He was holding a box in his hands. "Miss, are you okay?" he asked worriedly, not noticing the gun that had fallen from Carla's hands when she fell. Cornelio was stunned by the unexpected turn of events, while Yolanda acted quickly. She retrieved the gun and searched through Carla's bag, pulling out the keys. "Yes," she exclaimed happily, and then added, "and after all, it's a Birkin." "Who are you?" Cornelio asked, bewildered. "I'm the delivery guy. Delivery for Rollo Velarde, pieces he asked me to bring a few days ago. But then he didn't answer his phone, so I decided to come up today. The power was out in his building, so I ended up walking to the 17th floor and ran into this young lady here." "What a coincidence," Yolanda said with a smile. "You're the best delivery guy in the world." "I'll call an ambulance for her," the young man promised. "Call it, and the police too." "We don't have time," said the journalist, running toward the staircase. Since the power was indeed out due to an urgent repair, Cornelio followed her, and behind him came the loyal and brave Rocky. Meanwhile, the bewildered delivery guy was left alone with the unconscious girl. Getting into the car, Yolanda placed her hands on the wheel and, as usual, looked in the mirror. Her eyes were fiery, her cheeks flushed, and her hair disheveled. Cornelio sat next to her, while Rocky settled into the back seat. "To the bank," Yolanda ordered, burning with anticipation. When they arrived at their destination, the three got out of the car and headed toward the entrance of the financial institution, which was located in a grand old-style building. Although, in reality, it was just a flashy new construction. "No dogs allowed," the pompous security guard informed them. "All right, Rocky, stay here," Cornelio said. With the dog growling in discontent, Cornelio remained by the entrance as Yolanda presented the key to the falsely smiling manager. His expression changed noticeably, and he led them inside. "Please, follow me," he said with an elaborate gesture, pointing toward a discreet door at the end of the hall. They walked down the corridor, descended into the basement, passed several entrances, and finally arrived. "Here is your safety deposit box," the employee announced. "Do you want me to open it for you, or would you prefer to do it yourselves?" "We'll do it ourselves," Yolanda sighed. "Then, if you don't mind, I'll leave you to it," the employee said politely and left. Yolanda opened the safety deposit box and was initially stunned to find it empty, but then noticed two tiny memory cards inside. Pulling a tablet from her backpack, she inserted the first card. The documents that appeared on the screen after opening one of the files made her break down in tears. Thank you, brother. These are ours. What is this? Cornelio whispered. This is compromising material that no Titan could withstand. Our mayor is finished. Carefully, she put the memory card away and inserted the other into the tablet. It was a video file with her brother. For the first time, Cornelio saw what Rollo Velarde had looked like in life. No photos of him had been found in his apartment or on his computer. Hello, sis, the young man began cheerfully, adjusting his glasses. I hope you've cracked my codes and that it wasn't too difficult for you, since you're such a smart girl. Yes, I'm sure you're watching this video and not someone else, because I made the clues just for you. Sorry, sis, but your brother was a real scoundrel. Yes, I blackmailed the great and terrible one and stole his money. You rascal. I could have given you the compromising material to expose his plans to the world, but I'm too greedy to miss such opportunities. Besides, even though he's gone, another will come, and you'll have to fight again. But as you can see, I miscalculated. Since you're here at this safety deposit box. Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. But you should drink, sis, definitely drink. The account details you'll find in one of the files have enough money for you and your grandchildren. Or you can use the money for good deeds, as you see fit. If I were you, I'd keep it all for myself. But I'm a miser. Carla didn't tell you that I'm stingy. She knew who she was working for. She pretended to be a poor secretary trapped in a low-paying office job, but I knew how much her clothes cost. That girl works for our mayor, and he assigned her to extract information from me. Yes, they could have killed me outright, but they needed to make sure I hadn't passed the information to a third party. It seems they finally decided to act harshly and killed me. Just don't cry. I lived well, and if I could do it all again, I'd do everything the same way. Why are you crying, Yola? Don't shake your head, I know you're crying. Well, tell me, wasn't I clever with Carla? She always wore that stupid pendant I insisted on, knowing she hated it, and she never guessed the important information it held. I hope I didn't cause you too much trouble. Sure, I could have given you all the keys while I was alive, but then all my blackmail would have been for nothing since you'd use that information to restore justice. That's more important to you than money, isn't it? We're different. But I still love you, and I know you love me too. And one more thing, Yola, don't bury me. Cremate me and scatter the ashes over our old dacha. That's sad, Cornelio said when Rollo's video ended. Yes, said the journalist, wiping her tears. But I have to see this through to the end. Let's get out of here, she said, heading toward the exit. Not so fast, a sharp female voice stopped them. The first thing Cornelio and Yolanda saw was a gun pointed at them. Another girl with a gun? Cornelio muttered, quoting a colorful character from an old cartoon. He didn't immediately recognize who was standing in front of them, but it was Juana, the concierge. Hand over everything from the safety deposit box, the young woman demanded. I don't understand. How did you bypass security? Yolanda asked calmly, as if nothing could surprise her today. That's none of your business. Hand everything over, or I'll have to use my weapon, Juana said firmly. But Yolanda didn't budge. She had worked too hard to obtain this compromising material, it was the work of her life. Come on, I'm getting nervous, the concierge growled. Maybe we can reach an agreement. Cornelio suggested timidly. No. Juana snapped. That's not an option. I'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3. However, instead of a gunshot, there was a loud bark, and a growling ball of orange fur lunged at Juana. The concierge fell, trying to protect her face and stomach, while Rocky barked loudly once more, then looked at Cornelio with an expression that said, See? I'm not a coward, and I've earned my food. Good job, Rocky, Yolanda cheered, patting the dog on the back. And how did you get past security? She then turned to Juana. Well, dear, You lost to another killer today, Yolanda said. I'm not a killer, Juana sobbed. Oh well, the police will figure it out, said the journalist. But before she could finish her sentence, a man in his 40s burst into the safety deposit box room. What did you do to her? He asked anxiously, running toward Juana. I'm sorry. I couldn't do it, Juana lamented. You fool. I've been telling you for a long time, you started a game that was unjustifiable. He hugged the unfortunate assailant. What's going on here? And where's the security? Yolanda asked. There won't be any security. This is my bank, the man admitted. Yours? Yes. You probably have a lot to tell us, Yolanda said. Exactly. So, please, let's go to my office. The secretary brought coffee with cookies and chocolates, and Cornelio and Yolanda realized they hadn't eaten anything that morning. However, they had no appetite. We're married, the man confessed. We have no children, but we had a nephew who opposed the mayor and his gang when they wanted to demolish part of the old historic cemetery to build a shopping center with money from the budget intended for a park. But our nephew couldn't handle it and ended up in the river. Juana mourned him like a son and decided to do everything she could to avenge him. I tried to dissuade her because, even with all my money and connections, I couldn't do anything. But somehow, she got to Rollo, your brother. As I understand now, she knew he wouldn't provide compromising material and couldn't stand up to the mayor. So, she decided to simply keep an eye on him by becoming the concierge in his building. The plan to get the material was supposed to develop later. So, you're the good guys? Yolanda asked in an almost childlike tone. Yes, the man nodded. Then why were you pointing a gun at us? Goodness must be accompanied by strength, Juana said sternly. Sometimes, yes. But sometimes it only causes harm, Cornelio said thoughtfully, remembering how he had defended a girl years ago and had spent a long time in prison. With combined efforts, the banker ensured that the compromising material reached the right hands, and the mayor was disgracefully sent to prison. It was a highly publicized case. Even his son was implicated in several crimes, including possession of illegal substances. Rollo's body was found. It had been hidden by the mayor's people when they returned to look for it again since they had presented empty hands. The programmer was buried as he had requested, and his ashes were scattered over the old summer house. An important chapter in the book called Life had closed. A whole stage had ended, and Cornelio wondered what he would do next. Sweet feminine fingers cautiously squeezed his hand, and he met the gaze of the large, eager eyes of the journalist. I think I'll take a break from investigations and live a little for myself, she said, buying a house by the sea. The three, Cornelio, Yolanda, and the furry Rocky, finally found their happiness, though only temporarily, for nothing in our world is eternal. If you liked this story, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel.